Today I want to do a video about how failure, rejection, and critics do not have to be a bad thing in our lives. And how sometimes, success is our willingness to actually learn and grow from these types of experiences. When it came to the inventing of the light bulb, it was said that Thomas Edison tried 100 different times to create the light bulb, but 99 out of the 100 times he tried to create the light bulb, it failed. So on the 100th time, he actually was successful. So when somebody asked him, how he felt about that, he's like, well, I may have failed 99 times at creating the light bulb, but I at least learned 99 ways not to create a light bulb. And so sometimes when we're dealing with success versus failure, it's all a matter about not giving up and being willing to learn from our mistakes. And that's true about life in general, and that's true about the Christian life as well. Story, and it was about these soldiers that were engaged in battle, but the first time they were defeated. And when they went to brainstorm as to why, they figured out that one of their critical lines of defenses, or their entry points, was vulnerable to attack. And so, how did they discover that? They were ambushed at that certain juncture. And so they realized, well, if we just fortify this particular area that we have found is vulnerable, we can strengthen our defenses and maybe win the next time around. And so sometimes when we're facing criticism or rejection or some kind of issue that makes us feel like we have lost or failed at something, sometimes all we got to do is really say, well, what could I do to improve in this area better so that next time around I have a greater chance of succeeding? And we gotta think that way if we want to be successful at anything in life. And it's true with the Christian life, and it's true with whether you're looking for a job or whether you're trying to go for this or go for that. If you're going to a job and you're going to one interview after another, and then you keep learning from why you're getting turned down at certain jobs, you can improve at your presentation of yourself and your interviewing skills. And sometimes, imagine if a man goes to 10 interviews and 9 of those interviews he gets turned down, and he asks each time, what was it, if he asked respectfully, what was it about my application or my presentation of myself do you think I could improve on? And let's just say that 9 of those people who turned him down for a job gave him some advice. And so he took it to heart, he wrote it down, and he improved on that. And on the 10th time, he got the job. So that's one way we can really strategically work on improving ourselves when it comes to this or that in life. We're going to read from a passage in Scripture about how the Israelites were defeated twice in a battle, but they didn't give up. They went back to the Lord and asked him what they should do. We are going to read this particular passage in Judges 20, and we see that earlier on there was a horrific crime that had taken place where this woman was raped and murdered and by a man of a certain town, and the fellow Israelites wanted to bring justice down on the heads of the men who had done that horrendous evil act of sin in the sight of the Lord. And the Lord actually ends up allowing the whole city to be turned over to destruction where those men lived because they refused to give up the fugitives that had fled there to try to get away from justice. And so we see here in this story, then all the Israelites from Dan and Beersheba and from all the lands of Gilead came together as one and assembled before the Lord at Mizpah. The leaders of all the people of the tribes of Israel took their positions, and at the assembly of God's people, 400,000 armed men with swords. The Benjamites heard that the Israelites had gone up to Mizpah. Then the Israelites said, "Tell us how this awful thing happened." So the Levite, the husband of the murdered woman, said, I and my concubine came to Gibeah in Benjamin to spend the night. During the night, the men of Gibeah came after me and surrounded my house, intending to kill me. They raped my concubine, and she died. And I took my concubine, cut her into pieces, and sent one piece to each region of Israel's inheritance, because they committed a lewd and outrageous act in Israel. Now, all you Israelites, speak up and tell me what you have decided to do. All the men rose together as one and said, saying, none of us will go home, not one of us will return, but now this is what we will do to Gibeah. We will go up against it in the order deciding by casting lots. We will take 10 men out of every 100 from all the tribes of Israel, and 100 from 1,000, and 1,000 from 10,000, to get provisions for the army. Then when the army arrives at Gibeah in the Benjamin, if we can give them what they deserve for this outrageous act done in Israel. So all the Israelites got together and united as one against the city. The tribes of Israel sent messengers throughout the tribes of Benjamin, saying, what about this awful crime committed among you? Now turn over those wicked men of Gibeah over to us, so we may put them to death and purge the evil from Israel. And this was actually a very biblical thing too, because this, according to the law, if somebody committed some crime like that and shed innocent blood and murdered somebody, and they fled for their lives to try to escape justice, they were supposed to be turned over to the avengers of blood and put to death. Capital punishment. Now, this did not apply if somebody was unintentional manslaughter. So, like, for example, if somebody was cutting a piece of firewood and the axe handle flew off and hit somebody in the head and they died, that was unintentional killing, and therefore it didn't apply to that. But since it was unintentional and not done with malice, but what these men had done was they had raped this woman and she died as a result, and so they were all assembling together against the town of Gibeah, who were hiding these men and trying to keep them from receiving justice. They were going to make battle with them. And when we see what eventually happens, they first come to the city and say, hand those wicked men over so we can put them to death. Rightfully so. And so, and then it goes on to say, but the Benjamites would not listen to their fellow Israelites. From their towns they came together in Gibeah to fight against the Israelites. At once the Benjamites mobilized 26,000 swordsmen from their town, in addition to 700 able young men who were living in Gibeah. Among all these soldiers there were 700 select troops who were left-handed, each of whom could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. Israel, apart from Benjamin, mustered 400,000 swordsmen, all them fit for battle. The Israelites went up to Bethel and inquired of God. They asked, who of us will go up first to fight against the Benjamites? The Lord replied, Judah shall go first. The next morning the Israelites got up, pitched camp near Gibeah. The Israelites went to fight the Benjamites and took up battle positions against them at Gibeah. The Benjamites came out of Gibeah and cut down 20,000 Israelites on the battlefield that day. But the Israelites encouraged one another to go again and took up positions where they had stationed themselves on the first day. The Israelites went up and wept before the Lord until evening and inquired of the Lord. They said, shall we go up again to fight against the Benjamites, our fellow Israelites? The Lord answered, go up against them. Okay, so we see they were defeated at first, and then second time, the Israelites drew near Benjamin the second day, and this time, when the Benjamites came out from Gibeah to oppose them, they cut down another 18,000 Israelites, all of them armed with swords. Then all the Israelites and the whole army went to Bethel, and there they sat and wept, weeping before the Lord. They fasted until evening and presented burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. And the Israelites inquired of the Lord in the days of the Ark of the Covenant was there. And Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, ministering before it, they asked, shall we go up again to fight against the Benjamites, our fellow Israelites, or not? the Lord responded, "Go, for tomorrow I will give them into your hands." Okay, so first two times they were defeated, but they didn't give up. They kept going back to the Lord and say, "Do you still want us to do this?" And God says, "Yep, tomorrow it's going to happen." And the Lord responded, "Go, for tomorrow I will give them into your hands." Then the Israelites set an ambush around Gibeah. They went up against the Benjamites on the third day and took up positions against Gibeah, as they had done before. The Benjamites came out to meet them and were drawn away from the city. They began to inflict casualties on the Israelites as before, so that 30 men fell in the open field and on the roads. And the leading to Bethel and the other to Gibeah, while the Benjamites were saying, "We are defeating them," as before, the Israelites were saying, "Let's retreat and draw them away from the city roads." All the men of Israel moved from their places, took position at Baal Tamar, and the Israelite ambush charged out of its place on the west of Gibeah. Then the 10,000 Israelite able young men made a frontal attack on Gibeah, and the fighting was so heavy that the Benjamites did not realize how near disaster was. The Lord defeated Benjamin before Israel, and on that day the Israelites struck down 25,100 Benjamites, all armed with swords. Then the Benjamites saw that they were beaten. Now the men of Israel had given way before Benjamin because they relied on the ambush they had set near Gibeah. Those who had been in the ambush made a sudden dash into Gibeah, spread out, and put the whole city to the sword. And the Israelites had arranged with the ambush that they should send up a great cloud of smoke from the city, and the Israelites would counterattack. The Benjamites had begun to inflict casualties on the Israelites, about 30, and they said, "We are defeating them as in the first battle." But then, when the column of smoke began to rise from the city, the Benjamites turned and saw the whole city going up in smoke. And the Israelites counterattacked, and the Benjamites were terrified because they realized disaster had come on them. So here we see, at first, they didn't succeed. Second time, they didn't succeed. But third time, boom, they totally won. And it says the Lord struck down the Benjamites before the people of Israel. And so we always got to give credit to the Lord for our success. But we also can take responsibility to learn from our failures. If we fail at this or that the first several times, we should ask the Lord for wisdom to try to help identify why we did not succeed at something. If it's something He had wanted us to do, and we think it's something that is God's will for our lives, now we shouldn't try to succeed at something that God has clearly made known that is not His will for us. But anything beyond that, whether it's trying to do this or that, if it's in alignment with God's will, we should try to learn from our mistakes and grow in wisdom and ask God why we didn't succeed at this or that. And we should also be willing to accept advice. If somebody gives us advice as to how to improve this or that, we shouldn't be offended by it. We should learn from the counsel of the wise. If they are wise people and care about us and want to give us some good input, we should be willing to receive that and listen to instructions and try to learn from what other people's perspectives are on a situation, because sometimes people see things we don't see. Sometimes we're too close to a situation. They can see from a different angle, and they can see something that we do not. And so God, I think, really wants us to seek Him for wisdom and learning, and also to be willing to listen to the advice of other people who know what they're talking about. And hope you found this message encouraging. God bless.